Welcome to Value Through Vulnerability, a human-centered podcast from the Listening Organization. And today I'm really grateful to welcome Bobby Umar onto the podcast. Bobby is a professional speaker, 5 times TEDx speaker. He also does a lot of keynote speaking, specialist in personal branding. And also, and this is the bit I really like about Bobby, he's very big on authentic networking. So welcome to the podcast, Bobby.
Thank you, Gary. Excited to be here.
No, thanks so much for joining me today. So as we start to get going today, would you mind giving my listeners just a bit more of a lowdown on, who is Bobby, what are you passionate about, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. So I'm one of those people that had several careers. I had 4 different careers trying to find, what fit for me. So I felt kind of lost or stuck or unfulfilled in my career and my life path. I decided to dive into my personal brand to figure out what is it I was best capable of doing, and speaking became the first thing I started doing. So I became a professional speaker, focusing on networking, personal branding, and social media, marketing, and influence and storytelling, and started to grow that influence to about 500,000 followers over several years. And having spoken now around the world, I now am a speaker coach. So I do a lot of speaker coaching for people who want to build a speaker profile, brand, or thought leadership expertise as a speaker or public speaking, or maybe get a TEDx talk. And so that's a little bit of what I do as well. And then I also do coaching. I'm passionate about personal branding. I have kids, passionate about being a dad. And, I do a lot of work on LinkedIn as well, where I share a lot of content around thought leadership, career, entrepreneurship, and just overall helping people to speak better and be better as individual leaders. So that's really the short answer about me.
No, brilliant. No, thanks for sharing that. One of those talks that you, one of your TEDx talks that you put out, some years ago now, and I think actually, to be fair to you, Bob, it's quite ahead of the curve. Back in 2011, the 5 C's of connection.
Yeah, well, that was my first TEDx talk of the 5, right?
Yeah, do you know, but what I find amazing about that talk for me, and I'd like to explore that a little bit with you if I may, because,
Sure.
This podcast, as you know, is very much around the more human-centered aspects of life, stuff such as vulnerability, curiosity, mindset, etc. And for those that may not have seen this talk yet, and I'll make sure I add it to the show notes, do you mind just talking through the principle of the 5 C's for those that may be listening?
Well, the basic idea was, it came from my wife, who said, Bobby, how is it that you meet someone and you meet them for coffee or something, and within 15, 20, 30 minutes, they're telling you their entire life story. They're talking about their deep personal issues and therapy and their sex lives or whatever. It's like, how do you do that? And I was like, I don't know. How do I do that? And so then I thought about that for my first TEDx talk, and they're like, tell us your biggest idea. And so when I thought about it, I realized that, there is something that I'm doing to create that authentic, powerful connection with people. And I did a little bit of research on what Brené Brown was talking about in terms of vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And she had some data and research that completely aligned with what I was doing. I was like, oh, this is perfect. This makes perfect sense. Okay, let me present my case and how I do this. And so I took people on the journey of how I create that connection. And it's broken down into caring in a very proactive way, communicating effectively, and also assertively in a way to go down those dark, vulnerable paths, and then creating that connection. And that's kind of the model I used as part of my talk. And then to take it further, once you create enough connection, you start to build a community. And once you have a community, that's when you create change. And that's where the 5 C's of connections came about.
Yeah, that's lovely. It really resonated with me. And just out of interest, you speak about Brené's work and around vulnerability. If I was going to ask you, obviously, the name of this podcast, what would you say, what's Bobby's definition of vulnerability? What does it mean to you if you're going to describe it to somebody else?
Well, I think vulnerability is when we share something that is personal to us, but also something that we're concerned about how other people think of us. So if I share a failure and I'm worried that people are going to say, well, why would Bobby talk about failure? That makes him a bad leader. Or if I share something about my challenges with my weight, or if I share something about even my concerns as a parent, maybe I did something bad with my kid, I didn't know how to resolve a situation. Sharing that vulnerability where you will be judged in a negative way, I think that's where vulnerability comes into play.
Mm-hmm. And would you say, for you, do you see personally vulnerability being a strength or a weakness, or does it depend on the environment, in your opinion?
Well, I think vulnerability, that's a tough question. I mean, I think sharing vulnerability is a strength because you're empowering yourself, you're taking ownership of it, and you're willing to share it regardless of what negative things may come down the pipeline, even though most of the time it's very positive. Vulnerability, I mean, the question then is, can vulnerability be negative? I'm not sure. I mean, it's possible that people it goes back to authenticity and intention, right? Are you using vulnerability in an inauthentic way to sell programs? Maybe, that's, if I'm talking about my weight, I'm talking about my weight and I'm trying to sell a fitness program, here's how I lost 100 pounds. There's a way to do it that's authentic, and there's a way to do that that's inauthentic. And I think it comes down to, are you trying to really help people, or are you really focused on just making a sale? And so I think there certainly is a positive way of leveraging vulnerability, and there's also a negative way where vulnerability can be leveraged in a bad way.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I have to say from my side, Bobby, if I'm being brutally honest, part of my journey, as those that follow this podcast will know, was talking about my adolescent bullying, mental health challenges, etc. They're things I talk about publicly because I believe it's a good thing to do, to role model. It's okay to do that. And I don't think there's a downside of vulnerability when it's authentic. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, I generally think vulnerability is a good thing, but I can understand someone using it in the wrong way. But I think in most cases, I mean, using vulnerability will usually lead to a courageous conversation, which will usually lead to offers of support, which will usually lead to an overall growth for the people that are involved. But I think I would be irresponsible to suggest that there's absolutely zero negative possibilities. I think there are possibilities.
Yeah. And where does this, obviously you do a lot of work around personal brand yourself, Bobby. Where did that passion for you come from? Where did that sort of desire to work on personal brand sort of evolve?
Well, it came from my journey myself. Like, I had 4 different careers. I was an engineer, I was in brand marketing, I was a teacher, and I was a performer. And in all those areas, there's parts of it that I loved, but parts of it I didn't really fit in. I never fit in. I felt lost in my job and stuck in my career, unfulfilled in my relationships and what I was trying to do. And so when I was trying to really figure it out, I came to a point in my life where I was like, I need to really figure this out because I've been doing this now for 10 years and I'm not getting anywhere where I want to be. I've had some successes, had some falls, but I need to figure this out. And so by diving into, at the time, I didn't really think about it as my personal brand, but at the time I dove into my values, my skills, my interests, my passions, what meant the most to me, the stories of my life. And from then I was able to curate the fact that I'm all about a few things. There's a few things that are important to Bobby. One was people, another one was nurturing, another one was performing and presenting, another one was persuading influence, another one was diversity. And when I looked at those 5 elements, I realized that there's probably 10 to 15 different career paths I could take, but the one that was screaming at me was professional speaking. And so for me, that's why I did it, because I was trying to figure it out. And now I realize that it's so important to do that, because once you dive into your brand and you can align on the things that are going to make you happy the rest of your life, you want the rest of your life to start right away.
It's really interesting for me, because when I look at, there's a few people out there looking at sort of personal branding, not necessarily to the strength that you do, Bobby. And sometimes people, again, this authenticity piece, I've spoken to people in the past who say, personal brand, it can look a little bit fake, or I don't really know what it means. What would you say to those people that are sort of unsure of what personal brand really means?
Well, it's funny, I've been talking about personal brand for a long time. So back when I first brought it up, I remember I brought it up on stage at a keynote about networking. I talked about, your personal brand is your promise to every person you come in contact with. And it really took off. But back then, people want to know, what is personal branding? They didn't get it. They're like, I'm not a bar of soap. I'm like, no, it's not a bar of soap, but it's reputation, it's perception, it's integrity, it's what people think about you or say about you. And then about 5-6 years ago, people wanted to know, well, why is it important? And it's important because everything you do affects your reputation, how you engage people, how you engage customers and clients, how you are as a person, how you are as a friend, as a father. Are you always late? Are you always on time? Are you dependable? Are you honest? Everyone has a brand reputation that they have. And then now when I talk to people, everybody wants to know, well, how do I do it? And, people get caught up in the whole, well, inauthentic brands. Sure. That's another reason why it's important to know what yours is and how people perceive you, because you want to make sure you are being honest with yourself and being honest with the people you engage with. So investing in your personal brand will allow you to do several things. One, it's going to provide you more focus and clarity and purpose and direction in your life. That's one thing. So the focus piece is important. The second piece that personal brand gives you, it gives you more alignment. So if you want to be more passionate, you want to have more meaning, you want to have more values activation, then personal branding is going to help you get there. And then number three, it's going to provide more impact, because if you are focused and you're more aligned, you're going to deliver better work, you're going to be more successful, you're going to achieve more, and you're going to have a better legacy and story to talk about. So those are the reasons why you want to have an authentic personal brand and dive into doing it in the right way. Because there are people who do it and they don't do it the right way. They're not honest with themselves, and they come up with a brand that's not really authentic, and then 2 years later they're still miserable. So it's important for you to do that. And if you're going to worry about brands that are inauthentic, focus on you. Focus on how you can be the best you can be, because a better you is a better everything else.
That's such a powerful comment, Bobby. I think one of my big realizations over the last 9 months has been how the world, your world, all of our world is actually very much an inside out. If we're not doing the work on the inside, the outside doesn't shift. Is that something that resonates with you?
Absolutely. I think that leadership starts from within. And one of the things I've learned through various means is that you can't change people, even your kids or your partner. You can't change the world unless you change yourself. It starts from within. So I have to be the example. I have to be the one that sets the role model for everyone around me. So, and I know that the better I increase or enhance myself, the better everything around me is going to improve, including my family, my friends, my work, my business, and my world.
Oh, awesome. I'd like to step back, if I may. You've spoken a couple of times about your really, if I may use the word, Bobby, eclectic career. I find it fascinating. Sort of aerospace engineer, artistic director, cheese marketing at Kraft, brand marketer at Unilever.
Sure.
What were some of the were there golden threads through each of those roles for you, or was it really a case of learning something different each time as you accumulated? I'm really interested in that.
Well, I mean, when I did my whole personal brand journey and I reflected back on my life, I mean, certainly the thing that really struck me was that my best roles were the ones where it was people oriented, right? Working with people, that was a big thing. And my worst roles were the ones where I was in front of a computer, not talking to anybody for 10 hours. So I definitely could see that thread or theme out there. The other thing that always struck me was how much I was trying really hard to impress other people and to cater to their definitions of success, right? So I was trying to make my parents happy with my success. I was trying to make lots of money. I was trying to get that title. I was trying to get that corner office. I was doing all these things to try to make other people happy. But then in the end, is it something that really made me happy? Did I really want a corner office? Did I really want to make tons of money? I mean, those things are nice in some ways, but overall, they're not the most important thing in my life. And so those are probably two things I noticed. Absolutely.
Interesting. Do you find when you're working with other sort of clients or people that you're supporting, maybe they're trying to be a TEDx talk or, on their personal branding, how critical, you spoke about your own values, how critical is the work around personal values for people to develop that brand or to come across authentically on stage?
Well, it's interesting, I've written articles and I've done a lot of coaching training around personal branding, and we talk about values. And it's interesting, over the years, we look at values, we look at skills, interests, personality traits, stories of our lives. But I actually think values are the most important thing. What you value and the things you value and how you're valued will determine your overall value to yourself as well as other people. And so when you start with values, that's going to get to the core of the things that you really, really care about. And having an honest, authentic, and raw discussion about that with yourself as well as with your feedback network. The values piece is so critical, because values, they're fundamentally the root of everything that we do. How we talk, how we walk, how we speak, how we think. Your values are going to drive a lot of that. And so it's so important to understand what those things are. So it provides you more focus and clarity around how you want to act moving forward. Are you aligned with your values? So I'm now of the belief that values are really the first big step.
Yeah, it's funny actually. So myself, aged probably 41, literally a year ago, was the first time, if I'm honest, Bobby, that I consciously reflected on what my personal core values were. Because it's not something that we teach in, well, it's certainly back in my day, they're not things that are overtly taught in school. Has that shifted at all? Did you hear people sort of understanding their values earlier in life these days? I'm just interested in what you see.
I would say no. I mean, I think more people are talking about personal branding now, which is great. So people are learning at an earlier level. But in terms of, is it infused in how we look at schools and universities and colleges and early in their career? No. I mean, they don't teach many aspects of leadership like values and empathy and personal branding and things like that. I meet people at all ages. Young people are struggling with, they still don't know how to leverage personal branding for their career. And I meet people in their 50s and 60s who are struggling to figure out how personal branding can create more focus and clarity in their lives. So I'm not sure most of the best people out there who are talking about this kind of stuff have external programs that are outside of the normal corporate work environment and outside of the normal academic environment.
Mm. I've got a question that I like to ask my guests, Bobby, which is one's really personal to me. I find it really interesting. Is who or what is inspiring you the most right now?
Well, I think, wow, good question. I'm inspired by leaders out there who are doing things that I would like to be doing. So people like Brené Brown and Gary Vaynerchuk, one of my mentors, Ron Tite, they're doing some really cool stuff that I'd like to be doing. I'm inspired by my friends and colleagues who are doing really great things that are similarly aligned to the type of stuff that I want to do. And then I'm also inspired by my kids, for example. My kids, like how they look at life and how they love to learn things, the things they can do that sometimes I can't even do. I'm inspired by that. And then most of all, I think I'm inspired by my why statement. My why statement is something I use through Simon Sinek's TED Talk that drives what I'm doing. And my why statement is that there are lost stuff and I look for leaders everywhere. And when I wake up in the morning, I think about that why statement. I think about the people that I serve. I feel their pain. I know what they're going through. And so it provides me a platform and a focus for what I'm trying to do with all my work. I want to help people get to the next level to stop feeling lost, stuck, and unfulfilled. And so I find that also motivates and inspires me too.
And it's really interesting to me. A couple of times during our chat today, you've mentioned empathy. Is empathy for you has that always been something that you've held dear, Bobby, or is it something that's evolved within you? I'm just really interested in that.
I think empathy is something that's involved. I mean, most of us are often, when you're young and in your youth, you're more self-serving and trying to, get to that next level. But I think as you get older, you start realizing the more important things in life and understanding where people are coming from, particularly if you live a diverse life. If you're very insular, it's harder to be empathetic. But if you live a diverse life, you meet different people from all causes, races, and backgrounds. You start to realize that there's a whole world out there of people who want similar things and want different things. And so my empathy has evolved, but I definitely think empathy. I now say empathy is one of the three top human trends that are so important right now. Like if you look at the biggest trends in the world and what people are excited about or what's really hot, they talk about virtual reality, artificial intelligence, blockchain, cryptocurrency, disruptive innovation. Totally get that. I love, that's awesome. But the human ones, there's three. One is empathy. Trying to be empathetic to, as a leader, empathetic as families and parents, empathetic to people of different walks of life. Another one is authentic connection. How do I authentically connect with my team, with my customers, my clients, my audience, my family? And the third one is personal branding. How do I use personal branding to leverage my own self to then serve the world in a better place? So empathy is one of those three human things that I think are really important for us to understand and really invest time and energy to being better at it. So I spend a lot of time, particularly on social media, usually on Twitter, where I get a lot of trolls and stuff, and I always respond with empathy as best I can because it definitely has served me well in terms of building bridges and understanding people.
And what is, if you don't mind me asking, Bobby, what does that look like in terms of trolling? Is this just like is it sort of just automated trolling? Is it I'm just interested? 'Cause it's not an experience I've had myself.
Well, I mean, when you're like me and you have 500,000 followers and you
Hmm.
post stuff, there's always going to be people that are going to say stuff. So I'll say something very similar on, for example, International Women's Day, right? That happened last week. I post on Twitter about something that's why that's important, and there's going to be someone who just totally disagrees and says, something about what about International Man's Day, or what about, like, and I have to respond and I just say, listen, can you understand why it's important for women who've been systemically oppressed, to have a day where we can champion them and support them, and things like that. So it just comes by saying ideas, but there's people out there who project their pain, and this is where empathy comes in.
Hmm.
When anyone trolls me, there's empathy, because number one, hurt people hurt people. People who respond, they either respond in pain or they respond in bliss. And so these people are projecting their pain or their damage or their experience or something they've been through. And so for me, I'm not going to, completely dismiss it. I'm going to try to understand where it's coming from, because I think it's really, really important. And I'll share a quick story with you, which was many years ago. I was at a food court in a local mall in downtown Toronto, and there was a shooter. And I saw this guy 30 feet away shooting a gun 5 times. And I was with my 3-year-old son, and I went down and I grabbed my son and we dove under the table. And the entire room, 1,000 people, dove under the tables. And I was interviewed about this. And one of the things that I said was, it's hard to imagine. I can't imagine what that man was going through, that he was willing to shoot people in broad daylight at 6 p.m. in front of 1,000 people. I'm curious, what brought him to that situation. And everyone was shocked. They're like, how can you talk like that? Should you be angry with him and want him to go to jail or whatever? And I'm like, sure, I think he should be held responsible for his actions. But I also think empathy requires us to understand how this happened and why he became the way he was. And people were shocked that I did that. And that was like 7 years ago. But the message still stands, because empathy is something that allows us to put a little bit more context and meaning and perspective onto everything going on around us.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And how is your boy? Is that something so was it your son you mentioned you was with? Is that something that gets brought up still? Is it something that's been processed and dealt with?
No, we monitored that back in the day. He was 3, my daughter was 1, and we monitored it, but there was no issues.
Yeah, great. No, appreciate sharing that. So as we look to wrap up, Bobby, what are you sort of hoping for with regard to sort of personal branding, and with regards to, obviously, you're supporting more people being more comfortable speaking on stage, etc. What sort of vision do you have for yourself going forward?
Well, I mean, I'd like to, have a chance to help as many people as I can with taking control of their life, right? Do you want to follow a path of success defined by other people, or do you want to own your life? Do you want to stick to the narratives that make you, comfortable, but also feeling lost or stuck in your workspace, or do you want to actually take the chance to own your life, to build your own dream, to transition to something that gives you more meaning and purpose and clarity, as well as a legacy? And so that's something I think about. And then the other piece is, when it comes to speaking, speaking is a great way to build a thought leadership persona. So no matter what you are, whether you're a shoemaker or whether you're a tech person or whether you're someone in HR, you have an opportunity to build a thought leadership personal brand around you and your expertise. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in the corporate structure, but it can be still. But there's a great opportunity to leverage speaking as a way to build that brand. It's probably the best way to showcase your expertise, to show your personal brand, to show people that you can make a difference and have that platform. So that's why I spend a lot of time helping people not just transition through personal branding, but also to leverage public speaking as a means to build a thought leadership brand. And the reason I do that is because, there's a famous saying by Jeff Bezos from Amazon that says that personal branding is what they say when you're not in the room. Absolutely, I totally agree with that. That's your reputation. But I also say thought leadership personal branding is what they say when you enter the room. Oh, there's that person who's expert in this, and there's that person that does this. And so I'm on a mission to help people not only transition and get unstuck, but I'm also on a mission to help people build thought leadership personal brands.
That's great. And is that a mixture of on and offline, Bobby?
Yeah. I mean, my programs are online, but I also will meet people live in person when I do coaching or when I do speaking kind of keynotes and trainings. Absolutely.
Oh, fantastic. And how can people reach out to you? I appreciate you've got a big following already, but for any of my listeners that may not be following you right now, what are the best ways to get hold of you or to reach out to you?
Yeah, you can look at my website, which is www.rayallen.com, RAEALLAN. My other startup website is dypb.ca, Discover Your Personal Brand, DYPB. And then, of course, you go on to like Twitter, Instagram, and all different places, Facebook, LinkedIn. My handle is Rehan Bobby, RaehanBobby.
That's wonderful. Look, you've been an absolute joy. I've just got one final question to ask you, if I may. You've sort of touched on it a little bit today. How important for you is courage in building a personal brand and trying to get on these stages?
It's very important. Courage is one of the things that stops us from doing all the stuff we talked about. Why do people get stuck in the narrative that, they hate their job but they're thankful for their life at home, and they do a terrible job, a job they don't like for many, many years. They need to have courage to get over the doubts and fears of change. If you're in an unfulfilling relationship, you need to have the courage to stand up and speak for yourself. If you are feeling stuck in your job or stuck in your life, you have the courage to, invest in yourself and value yourself to take your life to the next level. Even when it comes to speaking, there's fears and doubts around speaking, but you have to have the courage to know your brand, know your message, know what your purpose in life is, and to get out there and share your voice and share your story and inspire people. So courage is one of the first steps to creating that impact for yourself. You have the courage to make a video, you have the courage to speak, you have the courage to have your brand, and also have the courage to be very, very honest about what you value, what's important to you. Because sometimes people are like, well, they're not honest, but you have to have the courage to be honest about what you really care about, because that's how you create greater impact for yourself.
What a wonderful way to finish. Bobby, you've been an absolute joy. Thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Gary.
All the best. Bye-bye.